It's very exciting to welcome everybody here today and welcome you to our Investor Day. It's been an exciting journey. My name is Michael Nishat, and I'm one of the co-founders of TerrAscend and the CEO of TerrAscend. Before I start, I'd like to take a few moments just to recognize some members of our team, our board directors, and our visitors and guests today. Start off with our chairman, Jason Wild. He was the chairman and largest shareholder through his funds and one of our guiding visionaries in the company. Matt, our president. Adam, CFO. I'll go in order so I don't forget anybody. Ari Tandler up here as well. Greg Smith. Ari, Robin, Joanna, Stacy, Heather, Christina, Paige. And in the back, I know that Maddie and Raquel are working really hard. We'll also recognize as one of our co-founders that was also here with us, Bassem Hanna. Thank you for coming. And Bassem and myself and Vijay started TerrAscend's, so thank you for being here and being part of the journey so far. And our guests as well that are here today. So Ryan Hudson, the president and founder of the Apothecary M. Thank you so much for Ryan, and we'll hear from Ryan later today. And Tom Rowland, the president and the CEO of Arbor Pharmaceuticals, who's been spending the day with us here as well. So thank you for coming up to be with us. We've come a long way since we first started. And like I mentioned before, this company was first started by three co-founders, myself, Vijay, and Bassem. And we saw what we had to do, and we had to build this thing from the ground up. And literally that our names, TerrAscend, means from the ground up. That's how we came up with that name. Terra meaning ground. Ascend means rise. From the beginning, we saw this industry differently. We knew that this entire industry is not going to be about cultivation capacity or cultivation space that you have. Consumers are going to care about the brands, the formulations, and the products that you're able to get to them. This is why early on, we invested into a drug preparation premises in our facility. We invested in building our facility up to GMP standards. And we ensured that everything that we do, especially being located in Mississauga. And I would like to actually thank Rick Mavernack, who's one of our board members here as well, on giving us that insight, and not to go and invest heavily in cultivation initially when we were first starting off. And thank you, Rick. And I didn't mention Craig. Is Craig here? There he is. Craig's also one of our board members. I apologize if I haven't mentioned him initially. But we've built what I believe is a lean machine at TerrAscend that's committed on driving results and consumer value. And we did it quickly. When we first applied for our license, we were application number 517, accepted by Health Canada on June 2nd, 2014. We were the 51st sales license, a cultivation license, and the 34th sales license. Now we're on the verge of achieving two great potential achievements in Canada. Our sales license for oils by Health Canada, and this week received verbal confirmation that we've achieved GMP certification from the German authorities, and we're going to be announcing a partnership there to be able to deliver products to them. We started a new chapter in TerrAscend last year with the guidance of our chairman, Jason Wild, where we pursued U.S. transactions and U.S. growth opportunities. And with the bringing on of Matt Johnson, a very experienced leader in the pharmaceutical space, and bringing the rigor and the knowledge and experience, we're looking to build our U.S. strategy and grow our team. And with additional additions in our team, whether in Canada or in the U.S., we have achieved so much to date, and we have so much to do. In the beginning, I said TerrAscend meant building from the ground up. Well, we're no longer in the ground up. We have achieved many things. And the TerrAscend and what it means is going to be changing. While remain grounded in our scientific principles, we will look to improve in everything that we do, including raising the standards in R&D, cultivation, processing, and distribution. I'm really proud of what the team has accomplished so far and what we've built, and we're very excited for the future. And with that, I'll hand it over to Matt and give you a little bit of the vision of what our accomplishments are and what we're going to be accomplishing this year. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. And thank all of you for being here, and for those on the webcast as well for joining. It's an honor, to be essentially shepherding the next evolution of TerrAscend going forward, and to be entrusted with such a great responsibility. When you look at the market opportunity here, and I go back to when I joined in Q4 of last year, a number of folks have asked me why. This is a huge departure from working at AbbVie, a pharmaceutical company, US-based pharmaceutical company with what is now the largest pharmaceutical product in the world, a drug called Humira. And really, it came down to, this is an industry that is emerging from prohibition, facing tremendous growth in multiple North American and international markets. I've been privileged throughout my career to be in companies like Baxter Healthcare, Brunswick, AbbVie, Abbott Labs, where we've been able to do well by doing good, thanks to the foundation that Bassem and Michael and his team put together with a focus on science, cannabis, maximizing the value of cannabinoids. This is another industry in a fledgling state where, we're going to be able to do well by doing good to the extent we succeed. So one of the things I want to do today is you look at these numbers. Everybody will tell you about growth. Everybody will tell you about the big opportunity in making a lot of money. Whether you do it profitably and how you benefit patients and customers is really what it's going to come down to. That's the value we endeavor to add. And what you'll see is that we are really well positioned to be one of the first true North American operators. And by that you hear about MSOs, you hear about Canadian LPs. We really put together, I think, a set of unique assets that will allow us to capitalize on the $18.1 billion market opportunity, both in Canada and in the US. In the US, you have cannabis in its various forms in virtually every one of the 50 states. And I'll get into more about how we're going to address that opportunity. With the passage of the Farm Bill and hemp-derived CBD, you have a $16 billion opportunity in the United States. The appeal of these cannabinoids in various applications, commercial applications, is tremendous. You have Walgreens, you have CVS. There are announcements virtually weekly with respect to the commercial promise of this area. Nutraceuticals represent 40% of that opportunity. And as Michael said, we have some unique assets that will allow us to capitalize on that opportunity. We'd be remiss, though, and frankly disingenuous, if we didn't acknowledge the challenges confronting this industry. There is significant regulatory complexity. There are age-old stigmas associated with pot smokers and back alley transactions and danger associated with being able to criminal schedules. I mean, it's that still exists today. If you talk to my grandmother or, going into a dispensary, is a whole kind of mystic experience. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're well positioned to address that. And the final point is around talent. Whether it be on the back office and operational expertise, or in the dispensaries, or on the educational front, or being able to build out the licenses that a lot of these MSOs talk about having, there are challenges there. So the other thing I want to do is candidly and openly and truthfully address these items. Okay? That's why TerrAscend. When you really think about it, we have a unique collection of committed people and assets that will allow us, I think, to move beyond some of the others more quickly in terms of capitalizing on this. So, our mission, it really comes down to operational integrity, doing things better, raising the bar. Some of you that know Jason well have heard him say Arbor 2.0, making an investment. We've got a great company. He has experience and perspective on how to do this. We want to take the best that Michael and team have built and raise the bar. So there's the operational integrity piece, both commercially and in the back office, and that's not to be underestimated. I was at a conference last week where virtually every panelist said projections are always too high and it takes too long to realize the value that people say they're going to deliver. So What we're going to tell you and what we're going to endeavor to do is build a trusting relationship with all of you in terms of being able to articulate what the challenges are, how we're going to address those challenges, deliver on time with consistency, okay? So that's the trust piece with our investor base, with our patients, with our customers, and with our employees, okay? So very, very important. Integrity, quality, and trust. The TerrAscend edge, I mean, if you were to walk away with kind of one slide, global operational excellence, okay? Raising the bar, raising the standard, first mover advantage. We have a number of firsts as the first real North American operator, but then also, as Michael said, drug preparation premises, GMP certification. These are early things that, you know, when you say an investment in TerrAscend and what can we achieve, it's global reach. Senior executive team. The team is truly excellent here because we have a blend of cannabis experience, but also industry experience from a variety of different industries that will allow us, on that prior slide, to address some of the headwinds confronting the industry. Strong emphasis on innovation and R&D. Okay, to the extent that cultivation commoditizes or things continue to liberalize and open up, what we want to do with the emphasis on science is really have unique blends of cannabinoids that result in a unique effect that can be protected from an intellectual property perspective, that focus on patient needs, that are driven by real data and insights. So that's important. We're vertically integrated where necessary. We're thoughtful, and this is something that I want to underscore. We're thoughtful in our approach to investments, acquisitions. Not all investments are the same, stating the obvious, but you all know this. The MSOs today will say, we're in 12 states, we've got 60 licenses. Yeah, but are you able to build those out? Can you do it profitably? Do you understand the local environments in which you operate? And what I'll tell you is we do. We're not in 12 states, but the states we're in, we understand deeply. And the states we will enter, we will understand even more deeply. Okay, so that's important. And a lot of that comes from the last piece around New Jersey. We've learned a tremendous amount from that experience around how to file applications, how to manage state legislators, how to build out and deal with communities in a way that is socially responsible and will ultimately bring consistent, efficacious, safe product to patients and consumers in those markets. So a number of firsts. As I said, we're uniquely positioned as a first North American operator. As a Canadian licensed producer, we have probably what, Michael? Is it the first DPP? In a cannabis facility, which you'll hear more about in a minute. GMP certified. The importance there is both the standard around quality, so good manufacturing practices, but also that allows us to be essentially an export platform. And finally, as mentioned a minute ago, out of 146 applicants, we were one of 6 that were granted a license in New Jersey in one of the most challenging application processes. So we scored not the highest, but we're second highest. And consequently, we're awarded the Northern District. So it positions us very favorably within the context of New Jersey in particular. So number of firsts that will position us well. When you look at the overall collection of assets and how we're positioned, I'll come back to this theme of NAO, or North American operator. We will have meaningful revenue in Canada. We have meaningful assets in Canada. We believe in Canada. We will have our R&D headquarters in Canada. It will be an export platform to the rest of the world. In the United States, we will bring a unique set of retail, cultivation, and processing assets on both coasts today and fill in from there. Okay? So you think about, what does NAO mean? Meaningful revenue and margin contribution from Canada and North America with an export platform to the world. We have Operations in a presence in every part of the value chain: R&D, cultivation, processing, retail, and distribution. And as I talked with a number of you before coming in, the value drivers are really four. The DPP, the drug preparation premises, which was a unique vision that Michael and his team and Rick had in setting this up. We're Canadian LP, with cultivation operations there, as well as scientific acumen. And the GMP license for export, so another source of value. We are a U.S. MSO through our acquisition of the Apothecary M and the granting of the New Jersey license. And finally, with the passage of the Farm Bill, that $16 billion opportunity that I told you about, we're uniquely positioned to capitalize on that as well and have access to over 10,000 retail doors. So very, very compelling value proposition. So when you look at Canada, this is an aerial photo of our Mississauga facility. Many of you have toured it. Truly, truly impressive. We have the DPP, as mentioned. It'll allow us to do a couple of things. For third parties, pharmaceutical companies will be able to do drug compounding, and there will be associated revenue streams from that, and scientific acumen gained, and capability gained through that process. We will also have the cannabinoid pharmaceutical R&D capabilities, and that's where, if we want to take unique blends of cannabinoids, put them together to result in a certain unique effect, and then file IP around that, take great brands from our Apothecary M acquisition and perhaps propagate those globally, there's a unique opportunity there. So that's a 6,500 square foot GMP grade facility, and really does represent a revolutionary step forward. So there'll be a whole set of economics around that piece of it that is a true differentiator for us. With respect to what's under the rest of the roof there, cultivation operations. When I reflect on my experience at Baxter Healthcare, at Abbott Laboratories, or AbbVie, looking at this facility, and again, some of you have toured it, there's not a lot of difference between a class 100,000 clean room in that setting and what Michael and his team have built over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. It's impressive. So 67,000 square feet, products that will be available to service roughly 70% of the Canadian market, or 25 million people. We've also got exclusive partnership with MCI that will give us access to, 1 million medical? Yeah. So very, very good. And then through our farmhouse strategic partnership, we have an exclusive on 20% of 1.2 million square feet. As some of you know, the Canadian marketplace has been supply constrained. So this is expected to come online middle of this year, or Q3. So, that'll be another opportunity for us to meet the demands in the Canadian marketplace. As I mentioned earlier, from Canada to the world, the GMP license will give us access to roughly 300 million more folks on continental Europe through export of our products there. So whatever we have in excess, or through strategic efforts, will be allocated in accordance with what's right for our patients and customers. And again, not to underemphasize, one of 11 GMP certified companies, so it puts us in pretty terrific company. Vertically integrated West Coast. I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides. You guys all know California, 6th largest economy in the world, sets the trends with respect to brands and cannabis in general. Ryan will tell you a little bit more about that later. Nevada, also very, very significant commercial opportunity. By the way, these slides will all be made available on our website, so feel free to go back and reference those statistics. This is one of the most fun stories for me on many, many levels. The Apothecary M, I worked with Ryan and team on this deal. It was contentious at times, but I love these guys. I mean, they're like, they're family. And I can't say enough about this, and I don't want to steal Ryan's thunder because he's going to be up talking about what went into founding this and the values and the ethos around the Apothecary M experience. But what I will say is they fit beautifully with our culture, The retail experience demystifies cannabis for those that walk in the doors, and that's critically important. And this is a model that we want to take national and across the globe. It's a tremendous story. We've got a video on this too, so I'm going to save some of the story for the video. One, though, important point that I want to make is around the data that, when you're in an economy like California and you have these iconic brands, everybody that's got a cannabis brand comes to Ryan and his team and says, put us on your shelves. They have a treasure trove of data around what works, what are patients and consumers interested in, what are the designs and brands that resonate with folks in that market that we could then apply to our next Apothecary M, which will be a little bit of a foot race between Berkeley and New Jersey. But so very, very exciting potential here to take this retail expertise and data and brand acumen and propagate that nationally. So back to, is it great to be in a bunch of states with a bunch of licenses, or is it great to have an asset like this that with revenues like this that you can take across the country in a thoughtful way and ultimately across the globe? I believe it's the latter. We believe it's the latter. New Jersey. This is an incredible story. So, one of 6 entities. These are photos of our sites. The cultivation operation is on a 16-acre plot in Boonton, and we're off and running, getting this up and going. We have a dispensary in Phillipsburg, and wonderful expertise already being lent from the Apothecary M team on the retail side in building out our Phillipsburg location, but also on the cultivation side. We have an excellent cultivation expert from the West Coast that's been consulting extensively with us on how to get that up and running. It's not about the medical opportunity, although that's incredibly important, and we want to generate access to efficacious, safe products for the medical community. The real opportunity is the rec market that's coming online, the recreational market that's coming online early next year. And we'll be, as you can see, we'll be well prepared to meet that opportunity. Finally, back to hemp-derived CBD, so switching gears a little bit. With the Arise Bioscience acquisition, Funky Farms, great product portfolio, existing product portfolio that resonates with young adults in a variety of consumer outlets. We have access to over 10,000 retail locations through the Arise Bioscience group. Original Hemp on the other side, this team is also great around brand innovation, sourcing, supply chain, distribution management, and brand development. So we see Original Hemp, and we're very excited about this. This kind of goes more toward our ethos in life sciences and spa and health club environments. That one we're going to be launching here shortly through that channel. So very excited about this opportunity. But that's not even the story. Okay, we've got the capability today. The story is here. When you think about TerrAscend and the potential, and again, not the number of states you're in, it's the value of the assets that we've acquired and collected and the interplay between them. Okay? So cannabis can't cross state lines or national boundaries, but brands, formulations, and intellectual property can. Okay? So what this is designed to show you is you've got your brands and formulations arrayed across the top, You've got your distribution points are right across the bottom. Given in the solid lines are our existing commercial relationships. So, take for example Valhalla, a brand that came to us through the Apothecary M acquisition. Currently sold through the Apothecary M, as well as other dispensaries in a THC formulation. Okay? Now we're already working on a CBD-only formulation of a Valhalla gummy that, given in the dotted line, we can run through the Arise distribution channel to a multi-state opportunity, to 10,000 doors. Conversely, we can take the Arise portfolio that you saw on the prior page, Original Hemp, Funky Farms, and put that on the shelves in the Apothecary M. And the interesting thing is there, unlike cannabis, that can be kind of out for patients and consumers to interact with. So when you think about if I'm going to go to a place and have an experience around cannabis, hemp-derived CBD, this will be a most desired destination. Because wrapped around that's going to be the best education in the business, the best product offering in the business, the best brands in the business. You know, it's truly, truly unique. And I think you can see that with, this is just the beginning, frankly, but the rest of world potential and the follow-on brands that we'll be developing. All backed by a great leadership team. You're going to hear more about us and from them over the course of the day today. Further, we're all going to be here after the presentation, having cocktails, so I'd invite you all to come up, ask us questions, push on our respective experiences. It's a great group. I'm proud to be in their company, so just an awesome team. Our board, can't say enough about Jason. One of the things that's worth highlighting here that makes, again, TerrAscend unique and not to be underestimated is really two things. You know, Jason, through JW Asset, is one of the largest institutional investor in cannabis, okay, with $750 million invested to date. Also, you know, from a business development perspective, with that dynamic, the deals that come through his office, he's our largest shareholder. He's deeply, as our chairman, is deeply committed to our mission, our values, and what we want to achieve, and the folks we want to bring it to. And this is a big deal for us. And so the deals that come through his office, we get access to. And that's huge. His mind share, his investment, and that's the other piece of this, is a capital backstop, okay, which not everybody has. So when you look at, as we do that thoughtful growth, assuming it makes sense, Jason's our biggest supporter, and the investment will come. So on that foundation of very solid industry experience, we also have some partnerships. Can't say enough about our relationship with Canopy Rivers and Canopy Growth. JW Asset, just mentioned. We've also got Arbor, you know, which through our relationships there gives us access to FDA and regulatory expertise in the United States and other potential partnerships that, as things continue to liberalize in the United States, we can work together on, whether it's sharing of resources, intellectual property, or commercial opportunities. So very, very exciting. Financial projections. We came online essentially after October 17 of last year. Q4 revenues were $5 million. Full year revenue came in at $6.8 million. Our projections for this year are at $135 million. That's going to be driven largely by the Canadian operation coming online, fully operational in Q3 of this year, followed by the Apothecary M acquisition, followed by the GMP certification and our ability to export to OUS markets, followed by the opportunity with Arise Bioscience. So those are the very concrete value drivers across those four value propositions that I mentioned earlier that will contribute to our achievement of that $135 million. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. And again, just remind, how am I doing on time, Stacy? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so with that, I'll open it up to questions. And thank you. Yes?
Thank you.
Or do we want it for the webcast? Let's get him a mic.
Yep.
I think it's Robert, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
This is Robert from GMP Securities. I guess, can I just ask you about a little bit more about Apothecary M stores and I guess the production infrastructure behind that? What kind of vertical integration level do you have in the stores and kind of the mix of your own products in those locations versus others in I guess, both Nevada and California?
So in California, we have operational right now 3 dispensaries in San Francisco. And I feel like I should let you answer, but you fill in if I make any mistakes. And then in Nevada, we have 1 dispensary and a 40,000 square foot cultivation operation. As far as product mix, sourced, you want to get into any of that right now, or?
It's just all at the moment.
Yeah.
But the Nevada facility is also co-located production.
Right, right. So that's the current footprint. And then we've got a couple related, one related business development effort that will bring San Francisco-based cultivation, and a dispensary license that was granted in Berkeley in a truly awesome location that we're very, very excited about. And that came, what I'll say too, and this is important to highlight, Ryan and his chief marketing officer, Elliot, did a wonderful job of stakeholder management as we announced our transaction. Community involvement, philanthropic efforts, engagement with the local community around, education, patient access has been a critical part of what's made them tremendously successful. We basically said in coming into this, we're not going to disrupt that one bit. We're going to, in fact, enable that model to grow and flourish. That message resonated with local legislators and regulators, so much so that incremental license was granted in Berkeley. So that'll be a total of 4 dispensaries right now, and there's some other stuff in the works.
Great, thank you for that. And I guess just to follow on, given you just mentioned maybe developments to bring in more, I guess, vertical integration in California, would you seek to expand your presence in the wholesale market there, or you want to just focus on supplying your own stores? Kind of what are you thinking about strategy in California?
The short answer is it depends. I mean, we're in the process of looking at it right now, but one thing that we want to ensure is that relative to setting the standard, we always know how to and have a best product offering when it comes to cultivation, and lead the way there. So I think we'll continue to play, in the seed to sale value chain in some way, and then we'll do what is commercially responsible, with respect to selling into our, and I think it'll be market specific, selling into our own stores, and being exclusive or wholesaling out to others to maintain commercial viability. But it'll make economic sense, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Great. And I don't know if I keep asking more questions here. I have a couple more, but
Keep rolling. Yeah.
I do that a lot. In New Jersey, I guess you have at least one retail location or dispensary location targeted. And what is anything you can share about your plans for the other 2? I guess you'll be able to open. And in terms of the northern region, I mean, I'm guessing that's favorable because there's lesser, other competition in that region, and it'd be preferable to get a region where you have, more of a market share opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's about proximity to patients and customers. We have some ideas, though it probably wouldn't be in our best interest right now to broadcast those to the universe. But we have some very nice locations picked out, and again, I think it's proximity to the patient and customer operations.
Can you just remind us of, number of other licensees that would be given that northern region, aside from yourself, or that are already there?
I don't have. There are six right now in the northern. Yeah, total. Yeah, so there's just. Yeah, total of 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll let someone else. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Rob Wertheimer, Melius Research.
Good afternoon.
Could you talk just a bit about exports to Europe, to Germany, whether it will matter to have local production in Europe or whether exports will be a viable and good method for a while, whether demand is inexhaustible right now or whether you need time and pacing. I understand there's a big patient population, but time and pacing for doctors to sort of get used to the product. And just your sense on production and then market development.
Do you want to take that, Michael? Yeah, why don't you take that one?
So, in regarding to Europe, I think we all realize that European is a huge market, and we know that in Germany just allowed some cultivation license to come online. That being said, the demand is huge, and currently there isn't enough supply to meet the demand requirements. As licenses come online in Germany, there will be recognition that there's local product, and there will be contracts that will be awarded with the drug authorities. So I do think that will take some time, though. I think that there is going to be a huge export market from Canada to the German market and other European jurisdiction probably within the next 3 to 5 years as the products, as facilities over there come online. If it makes sense for us to be involved over there and to build out facilities, something that we will look at. But looking at our greatest return of investment, it makes sense to work with local distributors, local partners right now, having them grow the groundwork, let the system develop itself, and we will have established brands. We'll understand the regulatory and the distribution system over there, and we can take that to the next level.
Perfect. And then the one thing I'd add to Michael's comments are, just operationally speaking, think about it from a concentric circle perspective. We're going to continue to execute close to home, so to speak, U.S. and Canada, where there are opportunities in building out New Jersey, organically going after incremental licenses in California and neighboring states on the western seaboard, doing the same on the eastern seaboard. And then probably more opportunistically look at international expansion as and when it makes sense.
Hey, I'm John Zamparo from CIBC. I want to ask about the revenue guide. You said $135 million for the year. It seems like there's a lot of moving parts in that. Are you able to say, if you just take Q4, what run rate that would be annualized?
Do we want to divulge that?
Yeah.
So
it's no secret. What we could say is that our facility in Mississauga is currently operational. We have about 18,000 square feet that's currently online, and the rest of the facility does come online in Q3 and Q4. We are making assumptions that, and it's a very, I would say, good educated based on what we've accomplished so far, that we'll be closing the Apothecary M transaction in Q2, Q3 this year as well, as we execute on our plan. That being said, if you look at where the facility is being built out, I would say that it's heavier on the Q3, Q4 side in terms of if it's skewing, as we get the entire facility built out and those transactions closed. And one thing that I would like to point out as well is that we haven't put any numbers from our Berkeley location or our New Jersey operations in any of this forecast numbers, even though we do expect that they will be up and running in Q4.
Good answer.
In the fourth quarter that we have, I think we're at 76, I believe, Adam?
70.
So that's helpful, thanks. If I could squeeze one more in, just a different subject. It seems like the New Jersey adult use measure failed, or at least was delayed because of concerns from Democrats rather than Republicans. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this. You mentioned communities and social justice. How do you address this, and how do you see New Jersey playing out in the next, 6 to 12 months?
So, do I take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the New Jersey market is a very tricky market, and I wouldn't say that the measure failed. I would probably say that there's still political alignment that needs to happen on what a recreational bill will look like. And the reason why it was pulled from the market, so it actually never went for a vote, is that they realize that they will not get something passed if it doesn't go through. That being said, we understand that the governor is very committed to get the bill passed, and there's been ongoing meetings and collaborations in both the Senate and other legislative resources in the state to be able to get something passed this year and move forward this year for the state, especially as New York is looking at it, Pennsylvania is looking at it. There is a tax play for the state here, and there is a local need for it. In terms of the social justice and angle, it's clear, and I think it's been agreed upon by everybody, is that there will be protections and records being cleared for people with past convictions, as long as you weren't dealing or you weren't selling. But for simple positions, I think that will happen in New Jersey, and that's already been recognized that will be changed into the laws.
I'm sorry, is my mic up? Just one thing I want to point out. He asked the run rate in the fourth quarter. The run rate will be $280 million.
Oh,
sales
yeah.
will be 70.
Yes.
But the run rate will be 280
I apologize. Yes.
in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Understood. Thanks.
Yes.
Just your thoughts on development of hemp-derived CBD in North America. You made some fairly positive comments, but obviously the FDA hasn't fully figured it out yet. So what's your strategy? How many points of distribution do you kind of aim to go after with if you're going after non-consumable products? Just talk about the development of that, please.
In general, we have an existing channel that gives us access to roughly 10,000 doors in, vape shops, various consumer retail locations, with tinctures, edibles, and things of that nature. We fully recognize the FDA still has to come out and regulate. Our strategy is to continue with the products and brands that we have in the marketplace today, and then thoughtfully expand those brands where appropriate.
Do you have access to 10,000 doors? How many would you be actually in?
Right now we're in a blend of actual retail locations. So roughly 2,500 retail locations. If you assume each has a couple of stores, we're probably 5,000. Then through the distributors, that's a harder nut to crack. We're probably, frankly, in more than 10,000 through the distributor relationships. If you look at what we've got in our database, we actually have access to 67,000, but that number is kind of ridiculous. So I'd say the harder number is roughly 5,000 if you believe the 2.5 assumption. The actual retail relationship number would be closer to 2,500. Does that help? Okay.
Hi, I'm Mike Freeman from Paradigm Capital in the healthcare and biotech group. I'm excited that you guys have set up this drug preparation premises, and it seems like you guys really are too. So I'd love for you to dig in a bit more about your plans for this, for the outcomes of this facility, and also what does it comprise? What have you built there?
Why don't you take the what have we built and...
All right, so the drug preparation premises is a new regulatory regime, and like Madam mentioned, it's the first one that's being proposed in a cannabis facility. There's actually only 4 in Canada. They're the nation. And the reason why they were built, it was really because compounding, which usually happens in pharmacy, was starting to be problematic, where there wasn't standards being met. The pharmacy's ventilation and HVAC systems were not meeting the standards for commercial compounding. And when a hospital or a surgeon or a physician wants to buy a drug or use a drug on a patient that's not commercially available, they would go to these pharmacies or these and they would ask them to manufacture or custom compound a drug for them. And this has increasingly been happening, especially with drug shortages and with products that are not on the market in Canada but are available in other jurisdictions. So what the drug preparation premises does is it's a form of a small commercial compounding facility where you're able to make GMP-grade pharmaceuticals, whether they are ointments, whether they are injectables, whether they are topicals, oral solids, and any other potential pharmaceutical dosage forms using different pharmaceutical ingredients and provide those to healthcare institutions and provide those to hospitals and healthcare professionals. In fact, in Ontario, hospitals are now required to buy any formulations from licensed drug preparation premises. So this will be a business on its own and an immediate opportunity to generate income and revenues for the business. On top of that, you have now this GMP premises where you're able to make these formulations and drug preparations. And the Cannabis Act allows companies to apply for drug establishment licenses, to be able to combine cannabinoids in these dosage forms, combine them with other pharmaceuticals, and being able to develop what we call a drug master file and a standardized formula into GMP settings that you could commercialize and bring to the market. Sometimes you'll want to do that through a drug application, which is probably not the preferred pathway because I don't think that it's the right thing to do right now, but you can bring these formulas to market right away. And if you can find intellectual property like Matt said in his presentation, you could potentially pursue a more expensive path of an FDA or Health Canada authorization and be able to develop the value from there by creating a drug to be taken forward. So it's an exciting opportunity. We view it as a platform, but also as a launching pad for potential cannabinoid pharmaceutical formulations.
And then Michael, maybe also just mention on the food efforts that we have ongoing, because I want to bring that back to the question on CBD and our strategy from a formulation perspective and working potentially with CPG companies
Absolutely.
In the United States.
Absolutely. So that's what Matt mentioned is one of our research streams as well. And it's the partnerships that we're it's been in the works with our food development group partners. And what we've done there is that we've partnered with food scientists and local expertise. For example, we partner with a local tea company to be able to make cannabinoid teas and bringing those to the market. And we're looking to bring those in Q4 this year. We've partnered with Chef Nadaj, some of you might know, to be able to bring pastries, chocolates, and different products to the market as well. And what we are looking for is once we bring these formulations on the food side, standardize them, learn how Valhalla makes their gummies and bring those to Canada as well, and maybe bring some of those formulations to the Valhalla line. Consider what Arise is doing on the CBD formulation side, on the hemp side of the business, and bringing those formulations as well. We've created this R&D platform for food science that we can bring all these foods and all these formulations, put the right science into how to scale them, how to grow them, what's the right amount of preservatives to put in there, because making something on a small scale versus on a CPG scale is very different, and take that and bring it to not just Canada, not just the US, but also to the entire world.
So tying it all together, there have been a couple of leads that have come through Jason's office from rather large companies, food product companies, that are very, very interested in working with us on CBD. And one of the big assets is what Michael just mentioned, our ability to collaborate on formulation, scale production, quality, and to do so in a GMP certified facility. So while not going into too much detail on the strategy piece, there's a big opportunity there from a consumer packaged goods perspective, especially as things continue to open up. And we do get guidance from the FDA on how to approach CBD as an ingredient.
Matt, we have a question from the Webcast, quite a pointed one. What do we think about the canopy acreage deal?
Well, I look at that and it's kind of a validation of our strategy, right? We, through a share restructuring in November of last year, as a Canadian LP, were allowed to begin to make investments in the United States. So we're there. Other people want to be here. And although I don't fully understand the construct of the deal, I think it's a validation of our strategy.
Other questions from the group? We probably have time for one more.
Another one from Robert.
Just going back to the guidance again for 2019, I'm wondering if you would be able just to rank in order of importance the contributing factors there. I mean, from my seat, it may appear like Apothecary M could be the largest contributor, followed by Canada, and then Arise, and then global hemp sales. Is that relatively reasonable?
Yeah, it's kind of neck and neck between Canada going fully operational and Apothecary M. And I would say this year, because it's going to be a partial year on a consolidated basis, that'd be why, Apothecary M might take second seat, and then you got the rest right.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, and there'll be time for more questions at cocktail hour with the full management team. Thank you, Michael, for the help in addressing the questions. What I'd like to do now is move to a short video that I'm really excited about featuring the Apothecary M. So please enjoy.
This is the kind of organization, the kind of business that you want in your neighborhood, that will take an empty space and turn it into a beautiful storefront that benefits the neighborhood.
I think it's very important for us as the Apothecary M to establish ourselves in communities and become part of those communities. And you do that through community outreach. You do that through talking with your neighbors. And once you become part of a community, you can then broaden your mission.
Everywhere I travel, people ask me, when are you bringing the Apothecary M to our city, to our county, to our town? Because there is really nothing like it in the cannabis marketplace right now. And to this day, really, we are second to none in that arena.
I have represented the Castro for almost a decade as a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and now as a California State Senator. The Apothecary M has been a hugely positive addition to our community. This is an A-plus operation. In all of my years in office, where I deal with a lot of neighbor complaints about many things, I've never had a complaint about the Apothecary M.
It's imperative that we support the community that supports us. I'm incredibly proud to say that we have donated over $350,000 to nonprofits, do-gooding institutions, and nonprofit events over the past 4 or 5 years. So the genesis of the Apothecary M concept started with me and in my efforts to relieve my chronic pain as a result of severe injury from when I was a younger active athlete. And I found myself going to dispensaries in San Francisco and other parts of California. And invariably, these dispensaries were not located in parts of town that you would necessarily want to visit. Less than savory things going on in that area. And every time I would go to these dispensaries, I had lots of questions. And I wasn't getting a lot of answers to these questions. And for me, about the 10th time I was in that situation, that was the light bulb moment. The Apothecary M is different from every other dispensary because of the education that our patients and our customers receive at the counter from our cannabis consultants. We have an incredibly thorough training program that all of our employees, regardless of the position in the organization, go through upon hire.
There are 3 days of intense training on product effectiveness, how it may affect people, the way to communicate to patients about the products that we have. There's also training on how to speak with patients and how to talk about the various products we have and their effects. We get a lot of compliments on that, on how well trained people are.
The Apothecary was rated #1 by Architectural Digest for their design in this location. It's a beautiful shop. It's like no other that you walk into.
So fantastic video. I mean, I'll just tell you, I've been to the Apothecary M anonymously. I've been there with Ryan. And the experience is identical. The bud tenders or patient consultants, as they're sometimes referred to, are awesome. Their knowledge is amazing. The experience is consistent. And the brands they have to offer, the education they have to offer is fun every time you go. So if you're ever in San Francisco or Las Vegas, please let us know. We'd be happy to arrange an anonymous visit or one that is hosted by Ryan or a member of his team. So the next phase of the agenda is going to be a panel discussion. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mary DeMue, is a Director of Business Development at Canopy Rivers. She's been engaged within the innovation ecosystem for a decade, working closely with investors, industry, and academia. Her areas of focus cover a broad range of disciplines within the life sciences, agri-tech fields, including human health, animal health, and plant sciences. Prior to joining Canopy Rivers, Mary worked in senior level roles at various private and public companies such as OCE and Bioenterprise. She also held portfolio management and foreign direct investment roles, was an ag tech venture capitalist, gained director level experience at an industrial seed stage company after exiting AgReg Kit, a startup in the ag tech space. Mary trained as a nutritional scientist with expertise in biochemistry and in genomics, and is completing her doctorate at the University of Toronto. Mary, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Heather Malloy, our Executive Vice President of Business Development at TerrAscend. Heather brings 20 years of experience in capital markets and structured finance and regulated markets. She entered the U.S. cannabis space in 2014 as an investor and entrepreneur, building startups in cultivation, retail, product, and brand development. Started working with TerrAscend in 2018, where she blends her love of transaction work and building teams as EVP of Business Development. She's been instrumental in getting every one of our key deals done. And importantly, and this is a personal note for me, I've been in the deal-making space, whether it be on the pharmaceutical side, transacting deals, integrating the deals. Deals can get contentious. Negotiating with counterparties is challenging. Heather drives a hard bargain. She's one of the toughest in the business and one of the best in the business, and we're truly lucky to have her. What strikes me every time is that a good deal is a multi-round negotiation. It's a relationship at the end of the day. And everyone I've talked to, whether it's Ryan or Scott Froman at Arise, loves her, as I do. I mean, it's a testament to the character and the value that she brings to the organization and the way she approaches getting deals done, which I think, again, speaks to the TerrAscend edge. So we're very lucky to have Heather. Ryan Hudson, CEO of Apothecary M. Need I say more? The video was awesome. What he's achieved is truly amazing. He opened the first Apothecary M in 2011, is a founding member of the Cannabis Industry Association, and a serial entrepreneur, and is an investor and advisor to the cannabis space. But more than that, if there were like a California Cannabis Hall of Fame, he'd be an honorary member. I mean, just a tremendous guy. We were up this morning brainstorming on opportunities and what to share with you today on a long walk through downtown Toronto. And again, kind of the same thing with Heather. And the deals we've done are just with truly great people, great teams. One of the challenges that every leader in the industry talks to me about is a shortage of good people and talent. Ryan and his team is that, just awesome talent. And a good human being, most importantly. Thanks, buddy. Michael, he needs no introduction. He's just awesome. So, anyway, we'll transition now to the panel phase of the agenda, and thank you again. Really appreciate the time.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We've obviously seen this sector evolve quite immensely in the last year alone. We have advances now in the plant sciences, either from genomic integrations to new expression technologies. We're seeing advances in the health sciences, from new formulations all the way to work in dosage forms. And particularly important is we're getting closer and closer to understanding standardization. So with that in mind, I just want to jump right into things and really ask all of you what most inspires and excites you about TerrAscend and the work that you're doing at TerrAscend.
So in the U.S. market, I think maybe the perspective is a little bit different in the Canadian market, in that I'm still really excited about being able to help open a market and create, access to a lot of people. I think that it's a right that people have, should have in terms of having access to cannabis, and so I think it's really exciting, and it used to feel a little bit more dangerous than it feels now, but to be involved in this market. And then working with people specifically out of California where there's a tremendous legacy, and I think that there's the origination of some really amazing elements of cannabis culture and branding and just excellence in terms of products and some of the best operators in the space, being able to take opportunities that we think are scalable, that offer a quality and experience or a product that we think can benefit people throughout our ecosystem is something that really excites me. So that's what I loved working with the Apothecary M guys and with the Rise. And I think for me, the opportunity to work with a team that has this scientific basis, and to the extent that we can help create consistent, predictable, and reliable delivery forms, that when a consumer takes one of our products, it will be the same or should be the same every time.
Great. Ryan?
I'm really excited about working with my new partners, with Jason, with Matt, with Michael, with Heather, with everybody. It took us a long time to find our partner in the space. We were courted very heavily over the last 2 years or so. We took our time. We really evaluated people pretty deeply and all the teams that came and approached us. And at the end of the day, we actually closed the books and put pencils down and said, you know what, we're going to stop this phase and just execute, because we had some projects in the hopper, and we weren't seeing anybody that we really wanted to get in bed with, so to speak. We didn't see a true partner. We didn't see anyone who saw the world the same way that we did. And more importantly, we didn't find anybody that we wanted to have a beer with at the end of the day, honestly. And working for myself and my family has been working for ourselves for almost a decade now, and we have this luxurious position to really work with whomever we want to work with on a daily basis, just being the point of the pyramid, having dozens of us and thousands of the vendors. And so if you came in and you treated my staff with disrespect, or you couldn't make an appointment, well, there's plenty of people right behind you. And that's a luxury. It is a luxury, and we wanted to keep with that luxury. And so we put our pencils down, like I said, and literally within, I think, 2 weeks after that, I was introduced to Heather, had a great call with her, and met Jason. And we were a little skeptical. We were like, well, we closed the book, let's move on. But then we meet the whole team, they come out, and really from the get-go, we realized that we found some like-minded folks. We were also a little dubious of the whole Canadian market. Frankly, Jason's approach on the financial side, being very disciplined, gave us a lot of confidence in that regard. But then again, at the end of the day, it's these folks right here that I get to have beers with, go on walks with in the morning, see the world the same way, and know that I have a good partner, and that my staff, my employees, and our customers and our patients are going to be in good hands with TerrAscend going forward.
That's amazing. And Michael?
For me, it's a few things. I would say the science and the innovations thing is very exciting about this industry, but a couple other things stand out. The journey. I think the journey is not a journey that you can have in a lifetime again. You're creating an industry, you're creating new things and exciting things that won't repeat each other. And also the people. You've built long-term relationships, and when you're building the foundations of a company like this, and you spend actually some time with these people longer than you spend with your family at home. And you learn a lot about different people, how they work, how you can collaborate and build together. And working together and improving the science and innovation, something we can talk about, is probably the most exciting thing about what we're doing here.
Amazing. Great. So maybe we can start with you, Ryan, because everything's kind of fresh with the video. We got to hear a bit about why you founded the company, which is an incredible journey. And obviously CPG right now is very front of mind. You're using data-driven approaches. Maybe you can walk us through some of the innovations then that you're looking at the future of Apothecary M.
Yeah, it stole a little bit of my thunder there, gave the whole Genesis story to a certain extent. I'm really interested in the CPG market, specifically in beverages. I think probably everybody in this room is. We have 2 or 3 SKUs now on our shelves in San Francisco with beverages. Hasn't really got there yet in Nevada. Obviously, it's a very nascent market. I mean, the entire market's nascent. Nobody across the United States owns more than half of 1%, right? So there's just so much room there. But we're seeing really, really good responses to the beverages in San Francisco, especially. We pushed our retail centers into neighborhoods. We're out of the back alleys, out of the red light district. The dispensary that I was referred to when I first became a patient, medicating for legitimate medical reasons, as you heard earlier, from injuries from ice hockey. So if there's any ice hockey fans in here from Toronto, sorry about the Leafs. That was rough. I know. sore subject. The Sharks won, so sorry about that. That would have been a great Stanley Cup. But the responses in those neighborhoods where people can just walk out of their apartment or their house and grab a six-pack of the hi-fi hops or the latest and greatest that's cold, and they can go down to the beach or they can go to Dolores Park. That's kind of a game changer for folks to have that in their backyard that they never had before. That's a high moat, or it's a big moat to cross getting into the neighborhoods. There's a lot of reticence, a lot of stigma obviously still associated with the business, but you can see from our aesthetic, from the education that we give our patients and our customers and of course our staff, that we're breaking that down every single day. And even today you see people walk into the Apothecarium, a little concerned about what they're going to see, how they're going to be treated. And then you just see all of that wash away immediately when they step through the threshold and they realize, wait, this is a dispensary? This is not at all what I was expecting. So, changing the hearts and minds, my Bill Clinton for the day, of people.
I can absolutely attest to that too. I did have the opportunity to tour their flagship store, and it was absolutely stunning. Everyone was trained very well from an educational perspective. It was quite the experience. So when you're looking at then from the consumer perspective, and you do have kind of this data play driven in the background, how are you collecting that data? What is that going to look like for the future of yourselves and TerrAscend?
That's a great question. There's very few tools right now in the software space to really aggregate that data intelligently and to put it into usable form.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, we're doing the best that we can, but I can tell you right now that the product spectrum is going to more obviously recreational, more lower dose. We now have products in the stores that are 1 milligram of THC, whereas 2 years ago the lowest was 10 or 20, or frankly 35 was the dose back then. And now we have more products that are more appropriate for someone who's not a daily user, who's not a heavy medical user. The soccer mom who just wants to replace the glass or two of Chardonnay at the end of the night with something comparable without the calories and without the hangover and the detrimental effects of alcohol.
That's great. So shifting gears a bit, maybe we can move on to you, Heather. Speak a bit about some of the, let's say some of the most compelling opportunities you have in your BD pipeline right now.
So I get no names. No names.
No names. No names.
I think there's a couple of things that excite me. One is I get to I'm co-located with Jason, and so we do have a tremendous opportunity to exchange ideas around deal flow and where we want to participate in the value chain. I think one of the things that's really exciting to me about being able to bring capital into the United States is that it allows us to eat while we dream. So we're not just focused on the growth story, we're focused on building businesses with a real revenue base and knowing what has already resonated in a variety of communities. And then looking to take the groups of people that really gel with our values and the mission that we're on to bring consistent, predictable, and reliable experiences, brands, or products into every market in which we operate. So on the BD side, right now, I think I'm really jazzed about things that are really familiar in other industries, and now they're crossing over to cannabis. So I like beverages, I like pill delivery formats, I like things that feel more medical or wellness, and I think that there's a huge market for women, and so we talk about that with women potentially being a big consumer. Was Ryan's original customer, was thinking about his grandmother or his mother in the dispensary community. And so I'm interested in some of the more pharmaceutical leaning products. I'm also really interested in the consumer and the last mile, and I think that's why we've had such an eye on retail, where we feel margins are going to be defensible in the long term. And I think we're really interested in direct to consumer. So one of the things we didn't talk about in the hemp space is that Arise does have a direct to consumer play online. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for us in terms of having a more scientific and technological approach, as well as through data aggregation, to really look at developing products that the market is already searching for versus pushing products into the market that we're not sure if people want. And I think the consumer is changing, and I think the consumer is changing pretty dramatically. And I think that being able to have those consumer and data insights and have product creation come off of that direct-to-consumer data play is really interesting. And then I think for me, one of the things that I get super excited about is just the people that we get to meet. Kind of going back to the legacy, I think in California, so many people took tremendous risk in order to start these businesses, and they did it with the intent of improving people's lives. and they wanted to bring medical cannabis into like high need, high risk communities. And to have that origin and that point of, you know, care and doing good for a community really resonates with the philosophy that we have in terms of like long-term. We have a long-term view. We are, you know, as Jason says, long-term greedy. We're not focused on a short-term trade. We're interested in building a very long-term value proposition. And so I think that the fact that we're working in the California space and bringing that over to the East Coast medical markets and then up through Canada and out through the rest of the world is an amazing opportunity.
Great. So there's a lot, as you mentioned, there's a lot of consolidation in the space, new acquisitions being announced almost daily. How do you compete to win in an environment when there is a land grab?
So we meet often to talk about business development and the opportunities that we see, and we see a vast amount of opportunity. And we generally don't we don't participate in competitive processes. So if someone is coming so one of the things I think is great for these US companies is now they're actually starting to have coverage from bankers that are helping them access capital, because a lot of these people have been operating in these islands and they've been capital constrained. So I think it's great that there's processes being run. We're not interested in running in processes. So we are not going to be the fastest capital, but we are going to try to be the thoughtful capital. And so we have had people, I mean, I'm going to speak a little bit about Ryan here, but we've had groups that have been participating in competitive processes that, similar to your story, have withdrawn from them in order to undertake a more meaningful relationship development with us. So we like to date for a while. We're going to be thoughtful. We're going to get to know one another. We're going to make sure that the values gel. We're going to kick the tires. We're going to try to do quality assurance. We're going to want to understand where the product is originating, how it gets from point A to point B. There's a lot that goes into getting to know one another. So I feel like that ends up being the differentiator that will turn some people off that want to exit, but it will hold on to the people that want to become part of something bigger. And I think that there is some capital that is hunting, and I think there is some capital that is gathering, and we are gathering. We are trying to gather the best in the industry and match them with what we think is very smart capital, with who we think is also has a pharmaceutical edge and has this amazing background in growth and integration of large pharma companies. And if you bring the capital with the people and the pharma experience, I think that we are setting the stage for long-term success.
Great. So it's really not about being the fastest capital, it's being the smartest and most thoughtful.
We're not going to be the fastest.
Yeah, that's great. And so maybe we can shift gears again to you, Michael. Talk a little bit kind of about the pharma side of things. The industry, as we mentioned, is scaling and maturing. And what are some of the key challenges that operators are going to begin to face?
I think one of the biggest challenges is in this industry and we see this a lot, kind of how this industry started with patients and with caregivers maybe operating in their basement, trying to make edibles, trying to grow plants, and to get a product to their loved ones or somebody that's immediately close to them. And how do you take that and how do you scale it? How do you make it into I'm not going to call it pharma because and if you've worked in this space or follow this space, this is not pharma. It's not food. It's a combination of pharma, and I think Tom mentioned that to me when he's on the site today. He's right on. It's a mixture of pharma, wine, and agriculture all together in one. And what you have to do is bring the best of all those knowledge and the best of the worlds and the experience from those industries in-house to develop the cannabis market and the cannabinoid market as we go forward. The most important thing that we're going to have to realize is scaling. Being able to scale something means that you're going to be able to be efficient. You're going to be able to have quality management systems in place. You're going to have recall systems in place. It's easy getting a product to a patient. It's going to be very hard to create products, put in thousands of storage shelves, and put it around the world and export it and be able to traceability and trackability, pharmacovigilance, safety monitoring as you follow those products. One thing that we've done internally at TerrAscend is we've brought people from different parts of the industries. We've brought people who've managed Apothecary. We've brought people that worked in Cadbury, in Wrigley, in Kraft, in different industries, and they are applying their knowledge from the industries that they've come from they're learning from people who've worked in cannabis as well, because we hire them as well, and from that perspective, and they're creating a scalable cannabis business that we can take forward. And this will be the challenge in the industry if you can't apply that principle as you create your products in order to succeed.
That's great. So if we delve a little bit deeper into TerrAscend's R&D agenda then moving forward, what would be the biggest priorities or initiatives from either your research platforms all the way to some of the observational studies that you're doing?
Sure, yeah. So TerrAscend, we currently have a multiple R&D streams that we're involved in. The R&D streams including creating pharmaceutical-based products, plant agricultural and plant genetics, and food development.
Great.
On the pharmaceutical and the product development perspective, I kind of already mentioned it in the Q&A session with the drug preparation premises, and we've talked about creating this platform to create standardized pharmaceutical formulation in a GMP settings. Very similar to how you'd say a kitchen can develop food, a drug preparation premises is also the platform to develop pharmaceutical formulation. It's the basis. A cream is always going to be a cream, a capsule is always going to be a capsule, and an injectable is always going to be an injectable. The trick is changing the active ingredients. You need to change the stabilizers, the fillers, but you want to get a product that works, that is stable, that has quality, and you can deliver to your consumers. And this is exactly what our research angle is going to be on the drug formulation side, is using the drug preparation platform to be able to study some of these formulations and looking to partner with companies like Arbor and partner with companies that can bring the FDA rigor. That would be their platform from an R&D perspective to bring those products forward. On the food development side, we've partnered with the food scientists to take the best of what we see in the space, whether it's existing lines in the cannabis space, gummies and different products out there, to the research that we do with consumers, and we go in and ask them, well, what is it you want to see? What is it you want to try? What will you buy? And using our food knowledge and our food scientists to develop scalable formulas to make sure that the formulas that we make can be sold, can be stable on the shelves, that can survive the transportation from the warehouse to the store shelf. That's another area where we're doing a lot of R&D work and looking at the emulsifications, the flavors, the stabilities, and the consistency in the product. And lastly, in plant genetics, where we have a partnership with Ascendant Labs. We've worked extensively, and I'd like to recognize Robin for doing a lot of work on that front as well with our Ascendant Lab and scientific team, where we're looking at things as mutagenesis. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically taking a plant, mutating certain genes to get certain desirable physical features or chemical features in the plant. It's the reason how rice became from this high down to this high. And it's the reason how you can make certain things become different colors, express different chemicals. That science is currently being worked by our team in Ascendant Labs, not necessarily for our own cultivation, but mainly for taking products and sending it to other potential cultivators so we can get it back. So other things that we're looking at is R&D and molecular security, expressing cannabinoids from alternative plants. These are all different things that we're looking right now from an R&D platform. And we have active partners that have a stake in the game working with us that are world-class involved in those projects.
Great. And are you looking at working with academia in the future, doing studies along those lines as well?
Yeah, so the great thing is out of all those research platforms is it allows us to understand the application of these products in the journey of patients.
Great.
So trials would be something that we are doing right now. So we are looking to launch a migraine study very soon. We just passed an ethics review for that, where we're taking products for migraine patients and we're doing an observational study to see how these products work. We're also working with a pediatrics hospital to be able to study the effect of cannabinoid products in children, mainly looking at end-of-life care, where we believe that there's a huge unmet medical need and an area where there is help needed for very vulnerable population and other rare pediatric conditions. That's something that we're very excited about, and we'll be utilizing our Solace Health and drug preparation premises for doing some of that research work. Taking those products and applying the research rigor and understanding how they will work, whether that's a product as food, pharmaceutical, or even a plant extract from a mutation that we did, is something that I think has huge application in these platforms.
That's great. And for the kind of the education of the audience, then, what is an observational study? How would kind of the community interact with your observational studies?
So in pharmaceuticals, we do different kinds of studies. So if there is what we call phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies. So a phase 1 study is basically you are looking to see if this drug is safe. Is this drug going to cause any issues? And you're very similar to phase 2 and determining the dosage form that you're going to be used for this patients. So in phase 1 and phase 2, you're seeing if it's safe and what dose am I going to use. Very highly rigored, very expensive to do. You have to control all your metrics, including which patients will be included, which patients will be excluded. Every patient has to be on the same standardized product. And then you go to phase 3, and in phase 3, you're measuring efficacy. You're seeing if this drug actually works or this drug doesn't actually work. And the really sad part about this is that you could spend over $1 billion, and in phase 3, your drug will fail. And you would have wasted that money because you would have had no efficacy that showed up in the phase 3 studies. What's worse is that you'll get your drug approved and you'll be successful and realizing that you don't really have any IP protecting you, and a generic will launch right away, and you won't get the value for all the work that you've done, which is a real risk in the cannabis business considering the IP gap in the cannabinoid space. What an observational study does is it allows you to take products that are currently on the market that people are taking, and you get to study their effect in a live patient population in a real life situations. Mm-hmm. So the everyday patients that have migraines, they're going to be using whatever product that they purchase, whether it's a standard, whether it's a product from us or any other patients. And we're looking at how these patients are doing. What we're looking for is how to identify the right patient, what dose works, what formulation works, and how these patients take it. And that helps develop the right strategy and the right basis to create a clinical trial and take that into the next stage if it makes sense to do so. And if it doesn't, it also allows you to collect valuable information of products that you already have in the market without going through a rigorous path. And it's a cheaper way to collect evidence of products that you can bring.
Absolutely. And that way it drives your product platform further, much
Absolutely.
quicker and much less expensive. So I just want to go back to you, Ryan. And I know we mentioned a bit about teams here. Maybe you could speak a bit about the Apothecary M team, kind of the expansion efforts that you guys are doing right now, and what that growth is going to feel like.
Well, the team, it's actually a family business. It was started by myself and two first cousins. We've had other members of the family involved at various levels over the last 8 years or so. But like I said, that's why it was so important for us to find the right partner, one that felt like an extension of our family. And what you were just saying just reminded me of our first conversation, frankly, on the phone that set the hook. I was like, okay, we'll take another meeting with these folks. They seem like they might be up our alley. I'm just really, really excited about scaling. We were talking about scaling the business and operationally, and all that is obviously critically important. But I think as critically important is scaling the culture that we've created at the Apothecary M.
Yes.
We have over 200 employees across 2 states. Our flagship location that you just saw Senator Scott Wiener speaking at is kitty corner to where Proposition 215 was authored in 1996 in the state of California, which legalized medical cannabis. And reminding all the new employees who are getting younger and younger as the days wear on and I get older and older, where we came from and why we're here. And that's part of an education process of the inextricable link of HIV and cannabis in California. And so part of our education program is letting people know the history of that, because a lot of them, they're 21, 22 years old, they don't really have any clue that was a thing that thankfully is now just a chronic disease for the most part. So reminding people where it is we came from is really going to impact where it is that we're going. But again, back to the culture thing. Culture is absolutely number one for me every single day. And I can stand in front of all of my employees and say, with confidence, with integrity, that these people look at the world and look at you the same way that I do.
Yeah, can I just go back really quick to it?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I didn't really directly talk about in terms of why people have an interest in working with us, and when I typically reach out and connect with somebody, it's in part because I'm sitting with Jason, and he offers a tremendous amount of thought leadership to us. But in a way, there's, some of the angle around pharma may be negative, but he's been such an amazing, successful investor in the space. And so I feel like part of the story in terms of like what it draws is that there's people here, and that a lot of it's coming from Jason's thought leadership and success. And what resonated so much with me when I met Jason and started thinking about working with TerrAscend is that he was so excited about what he was investing in, because he was like, it's like helping so many people. Like, I'm changing all these lives, and like I'm helping so many people. And that's really what drew me into TerrAscend, is that's fundamentally what we're trying to do. So I think that is part of the draw, and then I think the thoughtfulness of the capital and the ability to scale externally. But anyway, I just wanted to add that.
I think that's actually a wonderful point before we actually move to questions from the audience. So thank you to our panelists for your insights. If we could get a quick applause for them, great. And we welcome your questions.
Hi, Michael, you touched on this just a moment ago, but could you talk a little bit more about what is actually protectable from an intellectual property standpoint? There's a lot of cannabinoids out there, whether a different combination is protectable or whether that's obvious formulations, and just give us an overview of what you think you can actually grab a hold of.
It's a great question, and the intellectual property landscape is going to be one of the most challenging things in cannabis. And we were actually doing an IP review with Matt earlier last month, and we see lots of patents filed in cannabis, but I believe only 2 have been granted officially, from what I recall, in the US. We do believe that there is an opportunity for intellectual property, and it ranges from different areas. Obviously, trade secrets will be one of them. That's something that needs to be taken into account. In terms of patents, there's a lot of work that can be done in plant genetics, and I think, Mary, I didn't realize your background involved in that until today, but that's an area that maybe you can attest to, with something like plant breeder rights.
Absolutely.
Where you're able to create new strains and be able to build molecular securities on those strains, take those strain extracts and be able to use them, and there's a 25-year protection on the life of those plant strains for utilization in different areas and growing. The formulation space, so you can't patent individual cannabinoids, but combining different cannabinoids in different combinations and different ratios, taking cannabinoids and combine them with actual pharmaceutical products or nutraceutical products, and studying their applications in certain diseases and certain conditions, that I believe is a realistic areas where patents can be obtained. That's where I think the priorities are without going too much. We're doing a lot of, the genetic space has a lot of other opportunities, I believe, including different pathways that can be taken advantage of from an IP perspective. A lot of these things are already taking, but different organisms that can be used to produce cannabinoids, that's an area as well that I believe has been talked about, and we're taking a unique approach to that that's not been duplicated yet in the industry, and we're excited about what that could potentially bring. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Hi, Paul Rowan, investor from the States. This question is directed at Michael, Matthew, or Jason. What keeps you guys up at night? I mean, you're moving in such a dynamic space, and you're trying to move as thoughtful as you can. I mean, we all get second thoughts. I'm just curious, what keeps each of you up at night? And where is this thing going to go off the rails? And what do you need to do to keep that from happening?
As the regulatory folk here, I'll probably say it's the ever-changing regulations that changes every single day, and making sure that you stay in the middle of the path and being able to pivot whenever changes do come and become a reality, where you if recreational comes in New Jersey, if there's a delay in New Jersey, it's things that you can't control. If the U.S. becomes federally legal, that changes things and how you take and changes your plans. So making sure that you're ahead of the game, knowing what's coming and what's realizing, honestly, that's what for me keeps me up at night because I can't really control that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Matt.
Yeah, in addition to Michael's concern, I mean, from my perspective, it's people and the ability to have, you know, the caliber of individuals that we have on the stage today and in this room to achieve our strategic goals and objectives, number one, and then structural shifts, as Michael mentioned, be they regulatory, legislative, you name it. For the latter, though, the mitigant is, again, people. So it's not about being the fastest money necessarily or grabbing up the most share. It's about investing in a responsible way so when those structural shifts do occur, we're ready to pivot and adapt in a way that is sustainable over the long term and will continue to meet our patients and customers' needs, you know, in a meaningful way. They're trusting us to provide for them over time.
What keeps me up? What keeps me up at night is just a lot of work. There's so many opportunities that we have right now, and it is this is unlike any other industry I've been involved in. You know, I've run a fund for 20 years now. I've been involved with Arbor for about 9 years, and the level and the amount of work that is required in this industry is not like anything else I've experienced. So when you first asked that, it reminded me of 2 nights ago we were working on a press release, and it was I had some. There's a deal that we're working on where some of the principals came over to my house for dinner, and they were still there at almost 11 o'clock at night. And I knew that I had to finish. Everybody was waiting for me to review this press release, and my wife and son were there standing in the kitchen with me after these guys left. And I called up Stacy over here after 11 o'clock and started going through whatever it was with the press release. And my wife and son said, "This is amazing. You were on the phone with her at 7 o'clock this morning going over a different press release, and you're now on. Now you're calling her at 11 o'clock." And she never, because you were on speaker, maybe I didn't tell you that, and she never complained, you know, why are you calling me at 11 o'clock? And you never apologized and said, sorry to call you at 11 o'clock, but it's just because that is the culture. There's so much.
It actually didn't surprise me at all. I was like, oh, well, yeah, I mean.
You were up waiting, you were texting me saying, I'm waiting on you. So
I didn't know what time it was anyway.
Well, it was an hour early, you were in Chicago. But I think that, honestly, what keeps me up at night, and sometimes when I don't sleep well at night, it's because I am on a call about something that's important, a deal or something else, at 11 at night, and I'm not able to sort of, you know, get all. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still all keyed up by the time I get into bed, and sometimes I don't fall asleep till 2 or 3 in the morning. But you know, especially relative to when we first started with this whole investment a year and a quarter or so ago. Back then, we announced the deal. And the stock went to $3, and that kept me up a little bit at night in the beginning because I was like, oh man, the stock has tripled. The market's given us all this credit for all these things that we're going to go out and do, and hopefully deals and everything here in Canada. And we haven't done anything yet, and now I need to go out and, you know, get a whole bunch of things for the company in terms of deals and potential revenues, just to justify where we are right now. And I was a little uncomfortable, just a little sort of anxious. But sort of within the next few months, I got more settled in, and we really, especially, you know, in Canada, we got our license I think in March of last year, and things were going really well there. We were building things out, and then once we decided we were going into the U.S. and the traction that we started getting there. I mean, we've been talking to Ryan since last summer, like June or July or something like that. The traction that we were getting and sort of the receptivity that we were getting from all of these, the companies that we found that we really liked and wanted to be part of what we were doing. I would say that, you know, the anxiety went away, and now even, you know, today with our stock higher than $3, I am much more confident now at $8 or wherever the stock is than I was at $1 when we made that first investment. Certainly when it had gone up to 3, and that's why I've committed in terms of this financing that we announced a few days ago. We put in the press release that I committed to a minimum of $10 million in that round, and I truly believe that this is a better investment now at multiples of the first price than it was when we first did the deal at $1. So, back to your original question, I'm not kept up at night worrying about things. Just my mind is just going, and I'm working on it 24/7. That might be why I'm up at night.
I'm kept up at night by Jason calling me at 10 o'clock at night.
There's a trend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks. It's, Robert again at GMP. Question for Ryan, actually. I'm curious if you could give us a little insight on your customer kind of base and preferences that you see in California. What kind of products do you find that they generally want to have? Maybe even if you can give us some insight on the kind of maybe vendors that they prefer or brands that are emerging as being the most popular.
So the genesis of the Apothecarium was to solve my own problem, frankly, and to create a dispensary for the working professional, but also for my mom's generation, the baby boomers. I was going into a dispensary in my neighborhood, as I mentioned, and I was not getting the answers that I needed. And every single time I was at this dispensary, I would see women of my mother's generation, and even of my grandmother's generation there, asking these questions, not getting good answers. And so we set out to solve that problem. And a huge barometer of our success today is that you walk into any one of our stores, be it 2011 when we opened, and even today, post legalization a few years, you still see 50, 65% of our patrons with a lot of gray hair over the age of 55. My dad goes in there, he loves the experience. And that's the demographic that we've been focused on intently from day one, and we still are today. And to be honest, their preferences haven't changed all that much. It's just that the breadth of options for them has expanded in myriad ways. So they're looking for that low dose. They're not looking to smoke. Some are looking to vape. Most are looking for a 5, a 10 milligram gummy, for example, from Valhalla. That's one of our fastest growing and most popular products. And they're just looking especially for age-related malady relief, frankly. But that really has not changed. That's been very consistent for the past 8 years.
Human condition.
Great, thanks.
Condition.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more, and then we'll move to Jason.
Hi, John again from CIBC. I guess a question for several of you. Can you talk maybe about the benefits of the relationship between Canopy Growth, Canopy Rivers, and TerrAscend, and maybe what's the most important thing that each party brings to the table in that relationship?
So Jason.
So the relationship with Canopy Growth and Canopy Rivers has been a very positive one, whether it's having somebody who's walked down the path, learned from a lot of different mistakes that they've done in the path, and be able to provide guidance on the right vendors to use, the credible people that we should talk to, the people that they trust with their business decisions that can advise us as well. The Canopy Rivers folks have been critical in helping us look at our opportunities of how we build our facilities, of which packaging suppliers that we should be leaning towards, of giving us advice on connections and knowledgeable people, and not to mention at most the farmhouse. One of the things at TerrAscend that we looked at is that we want to be able to get products at economical prices to be able to sustain our growth, to be able to sustain our strategy long term. And we weren't going to invest in cultivation capacity. And the partnership that we established with Farmhouse, brokered by Canopy Rivers, who was a shareholder in both companies, really showed the value that a Canopy Rivers company can bring in the collaboration, where we have a greenhouse focused on cultivation of premium flowers, backed by one of the largest greenhouse operators in North America, and taking those products, creating a product transformation and putting those on the shelves for consumers and patients has been one of the biggest collaboration opportunities for parties involved.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to Canopy and Canopy Rivers, first of all, it was my conversation, some of my conversations with them, with Bruce Linton and with Sean McNulty, that was actually the genesis of my idea that I wanted to be involved with a company where I had more say in what was going on, because I was talking to them towards the end of 2017. Bruce had said to me, you're the only U.S. institutional investor in the space, which was surprising to me, but actually made me much more bullish on the sector overall, because in my view, everything's going in one direction in terms of legalization and legal cannabis sales worldwide. And my view was, if there were no U.S. institutional investors there other than us at that point, that there were going to be a lot of people trying to get through, one sort of narrow doorway and push up the value of the sector overall. And then the next thought I had was, well, in terms of starting my fund in '98, and for the first 12 years, we invested in all non-control positions in all public companies in the drug sector. And what happened over those 12 years was I built up a lot of knowledge and a network and made some money, and I brought all that to bear with Arbor, which is our drug company, which has been mentioned a few times. And I thought, as I was talking to Bruce, I was thinking, I think I can do the same thing here in the cannabis space. We've been investing since 2014. I've learned the space. I built up a good network. I know most of the large players in the cannabis space. And now I think it's time for us to do something in more of a controlled position, where I think that my thought was there's even more opportunity than there was in pharma, because in 2010, when we started Arbor, I wasn't saying I think we're going to be a top five pharmaceutical company in the world, because there's a few entrenched players like Merck and Pfizer and all that, been around for a little while. In this space, at that point, we were, I believe, the largest overall institutional investor in the space in cannabis. But my thought was, if I have a company where I could really be much more involved in, I think we can be a top 5 player in the world within 10 years or so. So anyway, that was a long way for me to answer your question in terms of the impact that Canopy Growth and Canopy Rivers had. But they were sort of very enthusiastic when I was talking to them about that. And Sean McNulty was like, I want to invest in that. And Bruce was very excited as well. And Sean actually brought me the TerrAscend opportunity. So they were great there at the beginning. And then as time has gone on, Michael mentioned in terms of Canopy Rivers, they've been very helpful in terms of their portfolio companies and the farmhouse deal that we've done, and the advice that they've given us as they've looked at our facilities in New Jersey in terms of retrofitting the greenhouses and things like that. And Canopy Growth, I mean, Bruce is certainly a leader and a visionary in the space. I speak with him or text with him at least, say 3 or 4 times a week, and bounce ideas off of him. And sometimes if there's somebody that's giving us a hard time about something, I'll go to him and say, hey, can you help me out with this guy? He's much more well known for good reason than we are, or that I am in the space. And sometimes when I need to, I try not to do it very often. If I need to have him sort of bring down the hammer on somebody, and because they're giving us a hard time with something, it's been very helpful. But overall, the relationship with both companies has been great, and I feel like I'm very happy that we teamed up in the beginning to do that financing, obviously in December of 2017.
Yeah, and from our perspective at Rivers, we view hundreds and hundreds of companies, even since the 5 months that I've been with the firm. And I mean, our whole philosophy is really finding best-of-breed companies in different sectors. So when we look at the synergies created with Farmhouse and TerrAscend here, we realize that the next genesis of the investments we're doing in the portfolio, we'll be looking to obviously integrate those with TerrAscend to make sure that they continue to be a leader in the space. guess that would be it for questions, I think.
Yeah, we will have plenty of time for more questions during the cocktail reception that will immediately follow Jason's Q&A, which we'll do now, and then we will we will adjourn for cocktails, and you can ask us all the questions you want. So with that, we will thank our panelists very much.
Thank you.
Kevin did a great job.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And we're back. And I'm here now with Jason, chairman. And so I'm just going to do a short intro to Jason. He's actually a pharmacist by training. He started investing in drug stocks during his first year as a pharmacist and was making a whole lot more money investing in drugs than dispensing them. So he decided to start a hedge fund.
Legal drugs, legal.
In 1998 with only $80,000 under management. Through his fund, he purchased Arbor Pharmaceuticals in 2010 for $2.5 million. They were doing $2 million in sales that year. 4 years later, he sold a third of it to KKR at a $1.1 billion valuation. He remains chairman and the largest investor in that company. Since he bought Arbor, they've generated over $1.7 billion in sales and over $500 million in EBITDA. In 2014, he started investing in the Canadian cannabis space. He was an early investor in Canopy, CanTrust, or Organigram, and actually Canopy Rivers, and still owns majority of those positions. Today, his fund has $1.2 billion USD under management, with over 50% of that invested in the cannabis space. So, welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
So when we maybe we can start by talking about your philosophy for investing.
Sure. So originally I started my fund in '98. For the first 12 years, we did all public equities, as I mentioned, mostly in pharmaceuticals. When it comes to public stock picking, I think that I'm a huge believer. There's like one main rule in stock picking, and it sounds very basic, and I say it to people, and they're like, duh, of course, but it's hold your winners and sell your losers. And everybody thinks that makes sense, but most people are hardwired that they can't. They do the exact opposite. They hold their losers and they sell their winners. Peter Lynch calls it pulling out the flowers to water the weeds. But people, that's how people are hardwired. I have other issues, but the thing that I'm good at is if I have a stock, as long as the companies are executing, and if the stock keeps going up, I'm like allergic to selling it. So that was what we did for the first 12 years, only public equities. I really loved the pharmaceutical companies that were building themselves through M&A and business development, and I put a few deals together around, say, 2007 and 2008, made the companies that I referred the deals to, made them a lot of money, and what did I get? I got a pat on the back. So that's what put the idea in my head. I want to start investing in private companies, I wanted to start a drug company. So that's what happened with Arbor. We bought it, as you mentioned, for $2.5 million, and really, I mean, that took off much faster than my fund ever did. And I realized with Arbor, it wasn't just about making money. It was, I go to our national sales meeting every year where we have, last year we had, 400 sales reps that were there, and the CEO and I give the kickoff every year. And starting even in the first couple of years, I would look out in this audience, and there were hundreds of people, and it would make the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I never realized how exciting it was going to be to build things and to build a company, and all these employees that wouldn't, necessarily have a job if it wasn't for what we created. So on the private side, I really love that. I love building things. My view is, if you do the right things in terms of building a company, then the money's going to take care of itself. Doesn't mean you don't have to watch expenses and do deals that make sense and things like that. But I'm actually not that super focused on money. I'm focused, and especially in the long term. In the short term, I'm not that focused on money. We just want to build things the right way and feel like the money's going to come flying at us. Today, I still invest in public stocks. Obviously, we were early in cannabis and starting to invest in 2014. We bought all of those positions privately. We still own the majority of them. So the whole hold your winners, sell your losers approach, that really served us well, sort of, because now they're all public. And I still love the stock picking side of it. But I also, on the private side, we've had a few other investments as well. And when we did invested in TerrAscend about a year and a quarter ago, it's just it's really, really motivating to build things and to build things in the right way, and to be able to recruit other people that look at things the same way that I do. And it's been, TerrAscend has been a life-changing experience for me, not necessarily from a money perspective, but just in terms of how exciting it is, and that we can be and will be one of the top 5 players, I believe, in the space in the world hopefully in less than 8 to 10 years.
Absolutely. So kind of diving a bit in on that, what actually got you first interested in investing in cannabis, and really what attracted you to the space?
Yeah, so it was right around the time we cashed out to KKR on that transaction with Arbor, and I had when we started Arbor, my fund was about I got it from $80,000 in '98 to about $50 million in AUM in 2010. We started Arbor, and then things took off so quickly there that by 3 years later, when we sold that piece to KKR, my fund was almost $300 million, and all of a sudden we had like $150 million in cash, sort of burning a hole in our pockets. I usually like to be relatively fully invested, and that was the time I got a call from a banker at Cormark. They were raising money for a company called Metrum. I decided to take a trip up and see what it was all about. I had never been in a cannabis cultivation facility. I'd never even called it cannabis. It was that was like a new, more professional term, and had realized that the whole perception of the space had changed. But met with the guys at Metrum. Walked out of that meeting super excited, not necessarily about anything specific about Metrum, because especially back then under the medical program, the companies weren't all that differentiated. They were essentially cultivators and ran mail-order pharmacies. But my view was, holy crap. This is going to be huge. The Canadian companies, since there's no conflict between state and federal law, the Canadian companies are going to be the leaders in the world from the perspective of being able to gather capital and the way capital was going to flow into those companies, but also because they were able to export to any other countries where it was legal on a medical basis. So I felt like the U.S. was really going to be sort of behind the 8 ball. And therefore, the Canadian companies were going to take the lead for as long as it took the U.S. to harmonize state and federal law. Yeah. I would have thought that was going to happen by now. It obviously hasn't. But the approach to investing in Canada versus investing in the U.S., certainly from 2014 till, say, the summer of last year, that worked a lot better in terms of if you looked at that versus investing in any of the U.S. companies. And I met Heather in the beginning of last year, and she had been, investing for the same time in the U.S. that I was in Canada, and she's like, man, I wish I thought of it that way in the way you were looking at it, because I made a lot less money. But around the spring of that year, I realized that in my mind, if a switch got flipped, and I was like, wait a second, John Boehner just went on the board of Acreage, which is a U.S. recreational operator. They're not going to start arresting people in the U.S. There's too many rich and powerful people in this space right now that they're not going to start arresting people, which was one of my other main fears, which is sort of laughable now, but back then it was more real. And then my thought was, I was looking at these MSOs that were coming, that were now going to start coming public, and the size of the U.S. market versus the size of the Canadian market, and just because sort of that thesis that Canada was going to do better than the U.S., like those things, they don't last forever. And just because I was right doesn't mean that I was going to continue to be right by only being in Canada. And that was right around the time that I said to Heather, we got to get into the U.S. All the revenue is in the U.S. All the market cap is in Canada on sort of a lower revenue base up here. Yep. And that was and I was so excited because we were on the CSE. From the CSE, you were allowed to invest in have operations in the U.S. The TSX couldn't, which was a huge advantage to us because all of the Canadian, the more well-funded Canadian operators were on the TSX, and they essentially, had a wall between them and the U.S. Trump wants to build a wall on the southern border of the U.S. There's a wall on the northern border for all the Canadian companies that are on the TSX or the NASDAQ or the NYSE that can't really get into the U.S. right now without sort of jumping through some very large hoops. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's sort of my journey through, in the cannabis space and sort of how I've looked at it.
So lots of great background there. Where does it evolve then from here as an industry?
Where does it go from here? I think, part of, this sounds like I'm sort of, like they say on Wall Street, talking your book, but I think it's sort of, as I look at how things are going to evolve and how we're trying to position TerrAscend, I think it's going to be, clearly the U.S. The U.S. is the largest market in pretty much every industry, and it definitely is in the cannabis space. California is where, like, so many of the coolest consumer products come from in so many industries. In the cannabis space, it's clearly a leader in the world, so we definitely want to have a major presence in the United States. I think Canada, there is a lot of opportunity. We don't really see, the same difficulties. I know it's sort of now in vogue to be anti-Canada, and there's been a lot of companies that have put up some pretty unimpressive numbers so far. But I think that's just an execution issue to a very large extent. We haven't released our first quarter numbers, but we're doing really well in Canada, especially relative to the amount of money that TerrAscend has spent and the amount of time that TerrAscend has been in the business versus so many of the other larger players. So I think it's going to be, what we want to be is a worldwide company that can take advantage of all the opportunities everywhere, U.S., Canada, rest of the world through our GMP facility, and also in terms of the vision and where we're going to go. It's going to be more, it's not necessarily high science in terms of being more pharmaceutical-like, in terms of doing what we call, more like science project type stuff. And we're working on some of those in a sort of reasonable way and not spending too much money on them. Looking at them from a real business perspective and, what sort of, how much is it going to cost us versus, what type of attraction we can get with those products that we're going to develop. But to me, it's more like, the pharma industry like 100+ years ago, where back then you couldn't be assured that what it said on the bottle was actually in the bottle. And that is, to a large extent, is what is happening in the cannabis space. A jar of cannabis-filled gel caps. Right now, there's a lot of variability in a lot of the products that are out there, and that is something that we're laser focused on: is standardization, quality assurance, things like that. And I feel like that gives us, we have a leg up over the vast majority of our competitors because most of them are not from the pharmaceutical space. Yeah. And there's something about the culture at pharmaceutical companies that prioritizes, QA and QC and things like that. At Arbor, we have a management meeting every Monday morning, and the first person who presents is the head of quality assurance. Mm-hmm. And that's just because it sets the tone for the fact that we're a company that is making products that people are putting in their bodies, and we need to make sure that they're the highest quality products that people are consuming. And that's what I feel like was lacking a little bit in the cannabis space, and what I think that we're going to excel at.
So you said this a little bit, but what would you say is really distinctive then about TerrAscend?
Well, first of all, it's definitely the people.
Yeah.
And I'm so, as I've been sitting here in the audience and watching Heather and Ryan and Matt and Michael speak, it's sort of like my son, who's 16 and plays guitar and sings and writes songs. When he's performing and I'm sitting there in the audience and anything, I feel like I sort of can't breathe a little bit, and just because I'm so proud, and I'm even getting a little choked up here talking about this because that's what I felt like when I'm watching everybody up here, and I was like, oh my God, I'm even more bullish than I was walking in here, and and I'm involved with this all every day. But that's what it always comes down to, is having the best people, and I know that we have the best people, and that Matt promised me he was going to mention my little catchphrase of I've been talking for the last few months that I want to change the name of the company to We Care More. Because it has so many different meanings. Obviously, when it comes to patients and consumers, we care more, and we certainly are huge believers in the fact that we'll do well by doing good. But it's also we care more just in terms of the way everybody goes about working at this company, in the way that I can call Stacy at 11 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning, and everybody is like that. And when you're that passionate, and you also have people that have such a good moral compass, then there's no way that we're not going to be able to be very successful. In any industry would be successful, but this industry happens to have overall a lower level of quality in terms of the people that obviously Canopy Rivers and Canopy Growth excluded, but. There's generally a lower level of quality of the people in the industry, so to me that's a huge advantage for us.
Sure. So then maybe if you could shed some light on who and what does TerrAscend look like a year from now?
Sure. A year from now, I think we'll be a lot larger from a revenue perspective and profitability perspective than we are right now. Hopefully, we'll have several more deals. Under our belts. To tell you the truth, I'm even more, I look more at where are we going to be 8 years from now, or 10 years from now, or even 15 years from now. My view is, and this was the same perspective that we had with Arbor, is if you build a company like you're going to run it for 20 or 30 years, then you do all of the right things to build a sustainable company in the near term. Yeah. And that's what we're doing here as well. We're not building this company to flip it or to sell it anytime soon. We're going to build this to be one of the top players over the next 10 years or even longer. But certainly in the near term, I think we've proven that since I got involved with the company about a year and a quarter ago, I think we've made really nice strides. I mean, in terms of I pinch myself when I think about the fact that we were able to do a deal with Ryan on the Apothecary M. To me, it is by far the nicest dispensary chain in the world, pretty much. So I am so excited about that. We've got that major pillar now under our belts versus a year and a quarter ago. We have Arise Bioscience, our hemp CBD business, is doing amazing and growing at a huge rate. Even sort of month over month. So that's all happened in the last less than a year. The Canadian operations have really come along really nicely, and that's why we are doing well in the Canadian market that some other companies have found to be really challenging. So to me, it's almost like, I was talking to Heather about it the other day, or she said it. She's like, getting the Apothecary M deal done and figuring out the structure and just all the hoops and the regulations changed 5 months into as we were papering the whole thing and figuring all that out. She's like, nothing is going to be as hard as that was. Like that, everything else is going to be easier. And we have several deals sort of in the pipeline that we think we're going to bring to fruition in terms of signing in the in the not distant future. So I mean, in terms of a year from now, I think I don't know. I mean, we're going to be even larger, and I think our metrics are going to compare even better to all of the other players that have been here for a lot longer and have spent a whole lot more money. I mean, when you think about like even the internet back in the late 90s, the big leaders in the internet now in terms of Facebook and Google, they weren't even around in the late 90s. So I don't think that it's just that the companies that were there first are going to be the ones that are necessarily successful as we go further along. And I think that we're, as I said, I think we're definitely going to be one of the leaders, and we've been able to benefit by the mistakes that a lot of the other companies have made, and that I've been able to witness, firsthand.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. I do want to give time to the audience to ask Jason some questions. So if we could open it up to you now. Any questions?
Craig?
Can you give us an idea of how you'll be able to leverage your relationships and success through Arbor with what you're doing now, especially given that you just had the GMP certification?
Yes. So we have been, and Tom Rowland, who just had to leave to go catch a flight, he's one of the senior executives at Arbor, who was up here for the presentation and to meet with us today. We're exploring a lot of different ways to work with Arbor. Arbor, has spent over the last 3 years. Arbor has spent over $100 million in R&D. They are definitely they are sales focused, sales and marketing focused, but they are also research and development focused. So we have been, for the last year and a quarter, we've been using them as a resource, and when we have a question that they have sort of the capabilities in-house to answer, we are very quick to reach out and ask them. They've also helped us with tons of different things, like us coming into the U.S. and figuring out how to structure our employees and what to use as whether to use a PEO or self-insuring versus group insurance and things like that. They've been a great resource in that respect. Over the last, I would say this is more recent, over the last month or so, they have gotten much, much more excited. Not that they weren't in the first place, but much, much more excited about what they're seeing and what we've accomplished. And the CEO of Arbor's been up here several times over the last few months, and he's just he said to me the last time he was here, he was like, man, he's like, I missed it. He's like, he came with me to a meeting in January of last year, and we walked out. That was when the stock was $3. And he walked out with me, and we walked out to the street, and he I never told any of you guys, I don't want to upset you, but he's like, man, I don't know what you're going to do here. Essentially, like, you're like, you're way overvalued, and I don't know, what's the plan here? And then when he was just here a few weeks ago, he was like, oh my God, I missed it. This is unbelievable, and I can't believe, the things that you see in companies that are growing to the extent that we are at our facility in Mississauga, and we, have this huge space, and we have to house a bunch of people in trailers and stuff like that in the back parking lot because we're busting at the seams. He was so excited. I mean, I guess his opinion wasn't that accurate when he was like, sort of like, I don't know what I would do if I was you back in January. So maybe I shouldn't be as excited when he was like off the wall excited a few weeks ago. But they've gotten a lot more excited, and they've gotten much more engaged, and they've been watching at Arbor. They've been watching what's been happening in the U.S. And with CBD and things like that. And we are actively in discussions with them between TerrAscend and Arbor about ways that Arbor can be involved in a more concrete way. And it won't necessarily be in all aspects of the business, but things like hemp-derived CBD in the U.S. And they have a sales force of hundreds of salespeople that go into 20% of their details are supposed to be them going into pharmacies to promote Arbor's products there. Well, not to give away too many of the ideas, but what would be a better way to get some of our CBD products into pharmacies across the U.S.? There are a lot of ways that we could work together, and we've been actively brainstorming on all of that for the last several weeks, and and we're gonna, there'll be more to come on that front.
Great.
Stacey.
Just wanted to ask about your philosophy on deals and on non-shopped, non-bidded situations.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. Maybe you had the field yourself a little bit more, a couple of years ago than you do now. So what do you give up by doing that way? And then what's your deal flow like? Is it just so amazingly robust that you don't need to worry about chasing expensive things?
Yeah, I would say that it's pretty robust. I mean, our philosophy at Arbor as well was we don't want to get involved in competitive auction type deals, because it's going to end up, we try to be very disciplined in terms of what we're willing to pay, and usually the auction process is there's somebody willing to, be less disciplined than we are. So we've just found, at Arbor and here as well, that it's just a sort of not a great use of our time, because we're not going to have a high likelihood of winning. And what I would say is, there are so many opportunities. Everybody wants to, every company, if they're not in the cannabis space, is interested in the cannabis space pretty much, and they want to talk to us. Say companies that aren't even involved, like food companies or pharmaceutical companies, things like that. And we have so many opportunities. And once we opened up our sites to the U.S. as well, we found companies like Ryan's company at the Apothecary M, where we were, we meet with I meet with a lot of companies in my office, probably 5 or 6 different meetings a day of new companies coming through, and the vast majority of them, I'm not really interested in investing in. But when I find the special ones like Ryan, and I really sort of make a real effort to sort of lay out our vision for TerrAscend and what we're looking to do, and how we operate differently than most of the other high-profile operators out there. A lot of these companies, they sort of realize that they need to do something, because a lot of these well-funded MSOs are coming in, and they're trying to either buy them, or if they turn them down because they don't think that they're credible, or they don't want to accept their stock as payment, they realize if they turn them down, then there's a good chance they could open up, a mile away or whatever it is. And those companies, a lot of these MSOs, they are funded with other people's money, and they are not, they don't need to be profitable. And it's very hard to compete if you're more of what I would call a mom and pop, or with you, it was you and your cousins, and you're not out in the capital markets and being funded by VCs or the public markets. It's tough to compete when your competitors don't care if they make money, because they're just they're basing their success on other metrics. So companies like the Apothecary M and some of the other ones that we're working on deals with, they realize they need to do something. They sort of need to go big or go home, because they can't sustain themselves if somebody across the street or a mile away is only driving revenues and doesn't care about profitability. And I feel like we're a really good solution to those companies, because we get to know them, they like us, they agree with sort of the ethics with which we run our business, and how we look at delivering quality products to patients and consumers, and we're basing the deals that we look at based upon discounted cash flows and MPVs and things like that, just sort of the way the rest of the world does deals. And these companies, they will sell to us for less than they'll sell to others, to these other MSOs, because they trust us, they trust our paper, and they think that we have a good chance of executing on our vision and our eventual goal to be one of the top operators in the world. So that's sort of why when there's an auction process, that whole approach is a little less effective, especially if we think the price is going to run away from us. But when it's more of a one-on-one type situations where these management teams get to know us, then we're able to really sort of get convince them that we're the best partner. And it's interesting in the space overall. I still invest on the public side in a lot of these cannabis companies. Usually there's a change of control premium. And at least in our case, there is a change of control discount. In terms of the deals that I'm looking at on the public side or the deals that are being brought to me by different bankers where we're investing in non-control positions, we're paying much higher multiples than the deals that TerrAscend is looking at to buy different operations. And part of it is because these companies, I mean, I think, Ryan's thought was, okay, I'm trading in my, my ownership in a dual state, operation for some cash and stock in a worldwide operation with people that I really believe in and that I've done background checks on, and they've come up, well. So even if I take less, and we've never directly spoken about this, but even if I take less as a headline number, I'm going to do much, much better in the long term if these guys execute on their plan because I'm taking a decent amount of stock. Great. So that's sort of been the dynamic overall with a lot of the other deals that we've been looking at is we can buy them for a lot less than sort of where a lot of the public market multiples are. Anything else?
Super.
What's up?
Yeah, hi. I was hoping you could address the liquidity or lack thereof in the secondary market. I'm a big believer in the business plan. I've been very patient and very happy with what I've heard here today. But, you and I are in the same field, and I come across a lot of what I would classify as sophisticated investors that have a lot of money to invest in. And the biggest pushback I've heard outside of lack of visibility, which is changing rapidly, is lack of liquidity. If someone wants to come in and buy, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 shares, it's just not feasible. If someone wanted to sell 50,000, it needs some maturing. And I'm just curious if you could just touch upon that.
Sure, absolutely. So, so I've run a fund for 20 years, been, stock picking, say, for 22 or so. And I'm a huge believer that liquidity finds its way into companies and stocks if their fundamentals are strong and they're growing rapidly. Because then what happens is the company becomes so inexpensive from a valuation perspective if they're driving revenues and EBITDA and things like that, that just, based upon that alone, the stocks rise. But what happens is the companies that are doing really well, there are a lot of investors that don't mind realizing that they're going to have an impact on the stock as long as they feel like they can, maybe get most of their position on before, it really takes off. My view is I'm not worried. Illiquid stocks are really, they're more volatile. But as long as I know that the fundamentals are strong and are getting even better, I don't really worry about it because I know that that there's no way that we're going to trade under a certain multiple if we continue to execute and bring in more great talented people, make acquisitions that bring in more talented people. It's all going to take care of itself. What I would say in terms of not to just give ourselves a plug in terms of our financing, but in terms of your question about somebody that wants to get in, the way, at least for the near term, the way that people can get a sizable position on is through this financing that we had just announced, and that has been there have been a lot of people that I've spoken to over the last 12 months who wanted to get involved, and they sort of stayed away. And once they saw that we announced that, they said, "Okay, this is my chance to put on a sizable position. This this is the opportunity. But my view generally is the stock will become more liquid over time. I don't want to sell any. That would make it more liquid if there was more out on the float. But to me, it is. We just need to execute on the plan in terms of building a great business. And if it's if we do that, all the other stuff, the stock price is gonna take care of itself. As you know, I've been talking to you now for the last I'd say 14 months or so, and we've been sort of hiding out. I mean, Craig, you know this as well in terms of talking to analysts, and that would be it's sort of the opposite approach that pretty much every other cannabis company out there has taken. They think it's all about getting more publicity around the company and things like that. And my view was I was looking at it a little more like a private company where we have this strategy now in terms of especially going into the U.S. And we got to figure out this whole restructuring with Canopy Rivers and Canopy Growth in terms of us not getting them kicked off the New York Stock Exchange and the TSX. So we were sort of not talking about it at all. I remember you asked me, can I at least see a deck? And I was like, no, we're not giving those out to investors. And it was sort of I was asking you to take a leap of faith. I hope that you're sort of satisfied with what we've been able to.
Pleased with the leap of faith that I've taken. More so today than yesterday.
Correct. That's great. That's
More
great.
so at 8 than at 1.
So yeah, exactly. So now that we were finally sort of ready for prime time over the last few weeks, we decided we were going to present at the GMP conference. We gave out our revenue guidance for the year. I know Matt said our guidance is 135. It's really the way we worded it in the press release is it's in excess of 135 million Canadian. I also, being involved in the stock market for a long time, I know that the companies that do the best are the ones that underpromise and overdeliver. So we made sure to assure ourselves that we were not going to put out a number out there that we weren't going to at least meet, but really we plan on exceeding those numbers. And I think what's so exciting is I feel like we vaulted ourselves very quickly and sort of right under everybody's nose. We vaulted ourselves up to being one of the leading players by revenue for this year, and it's not all dependent upon sort of what's going to happen. A lot of it's dependent on the third and fourth quarter because that's when the Apothecary M deal will have been closed and folded in. But the Apothecary M is already generating substantial revenues right now. We're not counting on any major all these other companies where it's really a hockey stick, but it's not that they're acquiring something that is going to get them there. They're just assuming their business is going to somehow grow substantially. So I don't know. Back to your, I know I didn't really, back to your original question. Liquidity, it's going to take care of itself. I'm sure. I'm positive of that. We always talk at the company about the market. Short term, the market's a voting machine, and long term, it's a weighing machine. And we're going to get judged on how much we weigh, meaning what kind of business we build. And I'm sort of thrilled at the way everything's happened in the first year and a quarter. And I know that if we continue to execute the way we have been, that there's no way the stock price is not going to work.
Thanks. Perfect. And I think to be cognizant of time, we have run out, and Jason will obviously be available afterwards. So we want to thank you for coming today and spending the day with us, listening to the progress of TerrAscend. And thank you very much.